between the veils. The fire was never the enemy, submitting the Yetzer Hara. There is a fire inside you. That is not a metaphor. It's a force, real. It has built you before, and it has destroyed you before. People gave it many names, but the ancient word is this: Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the part of you were trained to hate. But what if I told you the fire was never the enemy? What if the real problem was never the force itself, but the absence of the one meant to wear the crown over that force? You grew up hearing, kill the desire, kill the anger, kill the will. This text we're about to cross tonight, coming from the depths of the Zohar, says something far more dangerous. It says, the fire does not need to be killed. It needs to be crowned. What you call constant sin, weakness, the rotten part of my soul, may actually be primordial energy, life in its raw state, before it's crossed by light. Between the veils, there is a point where fire stops devouring and starts serving. This Segulah was written for that exact point. It is not a charm. It is not superstition. It is a spiritual architecture carefully built around a name. 4 letters, Yahweh, the name you were taught to respect from a distance. Tonight, we get closer. In this Segulah, that name is not decoration. It is the axis, a point of indivisible consciousness, an expansion that invades the inner room, a line that connects the unseen to what you live, a final letter that nails light into the daily world. And around this axis, vertical flames rise, not to burn you down, but to reveal a secret almost nobody wants to admit. The Yetzer Hara was never designed to be exterminated. It was designed to be subdued. This episode is not about how to kill your desires. It's about who was always meant to wear the crown over the fire that lives in you. If you've always felt there is something inside you that is not just psychology, not just trauma, not just my personality, stay. Because this Segulah does not want to control you. It wants to make you remember who has always stood at the center of your own sovereignty. You were trained to see the world like this. On one side, everything of God. On the other, everything of evil. Desire, evil. Anger, evil. Ambition, evil. So you went to war against the very engine of your own soul. But listen carefully. This Segulah says, Yetzer Hara is not a demon stapled to your heart. It is not a glitch in creation. It is primordial energy. The raw impulse of life before it is illuminated by consciousness. When it is forgotten, it scatters you. When it is remembered, it builds you. But remembered doesn't mean thinking a nice thought. It means reordered. And that reordering begins in a place you cannot touch. 4 letters you think you know. Yetzer. In this work, that name is not a logo and not a tattoo. It is an ontological axis, a column that cuts through every level of being. The why, a single indivisible point of pure awareness. The first H, an expansion of that awareness, light beginning to flood the inner room. The V, a vertical line, aligning what is above and what is below. The final H, light stabilized inside lived reality, thoughts, words, gestures, and around that column, repeated H letters form a field of containment, not a prison, a vessel, like glass walls around an intense flame. Without the vessel, the fire devours. Inside the vessel, the fire reveals. This structure is saying something without a single sound. I will not erase the fire. I will crown it. And that is where tension starts. Because everything in you was trained to believe that mastering evil means killing the impulse. Suppress, swallow, silence. But this Segulah whispers the opposite. True dominion is not repression, it is alignment. That is not comfortable, because it means the real battle is not against the force itself, but against the way you are using that force. And then a question starts knocking. If the fire was never the enemy, then who is? The text answers in a way that almost hurts. The fire was never the adversary. Forgetfulness was. Forgetfulness of what? Of the axis, of the name, of the original order of the soul. As long as you try to kill the fire, you stay forgetful. As long as you chase techniques to crush the Yetzer Hara, the only thing you prove is that you still believe it sits on the throne. The Segulah of submitting the Yetzer Hara does the opposite. It doesn't tell you to crush the impulse. It tells you to crown consciousness. And when consciousness returns to the throne, something invisible happens to the fire. It stops rising as chaotic explosion. It starts rising as an offering. Impulse becomes intention. Reaction becomes choice. Noise becomes direction. That tiny invisible transition is what this work is trying to freeze in one single image. But there is a detail most people miss the first time they look at it. And that detail draws a sharp line between a spirituality of neurotic control and a spirituality of real sovereignty. If you read this Segulah carefully, a pattern starts to emerge. It never describes a sudden miracle. It describes a state, a restored state of consciousness, not a mood, not a spiritual high, a state. That means when sovereignty returns, you don't become a different species. You remember who you were before you forgot. Listen to how the text frames it. The soul does not create authority. It reveals the authority that has always been present. That is dangerous, because it rips away a very comfortable excuse. I'm just like this. This Segulah is saying, no, you are not just like this. You are forgotten like this. And this is where the tension tightens. The text calls this moment the birth of inner sovereignty. But look at how it defines that birth. Not as effort, but as recognition. You feel the clash? Because everything in you was trained to believe that sovereignty is the prize of extreme effort. More discipline, more control, more self-hatred disguised as holiness. But this work dares to say something almost offensive to that model. True dominion is not repression, it is alignment. And alignment is not you beating yourself into a different shape. Alignment is you remembering the axis and turning around it. Remember the letters? Y, the indivisible point of pure consciousness. H, the expansion of perception that lights up the inner room. V, the alignment between what is above and what is below. H, the manifestation of restored order in the lived world. That is the path, from point to gesture, from awareness to behavior. Now tie that to what the Segulah says about fire. The fire, when not governed, consumes. When aligned, it illuminates. Notice the language. It never once says, the fire is extinguished. It says, it is elevated. Yetzer Hara is called reactive energy, and the Segulah claims, this work reveals the invisible instant when reactive energy stops ruling and begins to serve. So in this vision, evil is not the existence of force. Evil is force sitting on a throne that was never its own. The problem is not the fire. The problem is the fire wearing the crown. And then, towards the end, the text drops its sharpest line. The central teaching of this Segulah is silent and absolute. The fire was never the adversary. Forgetfulness was. That changes everything. Because if the fire was never the adversary, it means the war you've been fighting your whole life might have been misdirected. You may have spent years trying to kill what needed to be realigned. And while you did that, the true adversary, forgetfulness, remained untouched. Forgetfulness of what? The Segulah condenses it in one chain. When the name is remembered, order returns. When order returns, fire becomes light. So the question shifts. It is no longer, how do I kill this part of me? It becomes, what in me forgot the name, and how do I remember again? And this is where the Segulah stops being poetic and becomes dangerously practical, because it doesn't want to stay in mystical theory. It wants to trespass into the way you react when someone wounds you, into what you do with your desire, with your anger, with your hunger for power. But there is one aspect we haven't touched yet. One detail about this state of sovereignty that, if you miss it, will turn this whole vision into just another religious control system wearing a mystical mask. And it's exactly that detail we have to open before we dare ask how any of this fits into your daily life. There is one detail in this vision of sovereignty that, if you miss it, becomes a trap. The Segulah insists, this work does not impose control. It awakens remembrance. Remembrance of what? That the sovereignty of the soul was never lost. It was waiting to be recognized. That is almost scandalous, because religion, the way many of us received it, loves to treat you like a spiritual beggar. You have nothing. You are nothing. Maybe, if you try hard enough, God will lend you a little dignity. This Segulah moves in the opposite direction. It looks at you and quietly declares, the dignity was always there. What was missing was remembrance of who stands at the center. You see the risk? Because this can either inflate your ego or heal your soul. It depends on who you think is sitting on the throne when you hear the word sovereignty. If you think it's your ego, this becomes delusion. I am sovereign. My will is the law. But the text is not about crowning the ego. It is about crowning consciousness. Consciousness of what? Of the name, of the original order, of the light that governs without strain. May all who contemplate this manifestation be led back to the silent center where light governs without effort, and where the fire at last returns to its original function, to become a vehicle of presence. Now pull this out of mystical language and drop it into your life. You're in an argument. Suddenly the fire rises. You feel it. That urge to crush, to humiliate, to win. Until now, you may have called that the evil in me, and your reflex is usually either surrender completely or shove it down until you get sick. The Segulah offers a third way. In the very second the fire rises, you remember the axis. Literally, you can picture the 4 letters as a column in the middle of your mind. You become aware of what you feel, without denial, without spiritual makeup. You let that awareness expand. This is rage. This is hunger for power. This is fear of being small. V. You align it with something above you. If the center is light, how can this fire serve it and not me? H. You fix that alignment in a concrete gesture. Maybe silence. Maybe a firm word without harm. Maybe walking away. In that instant, the fire stops reacting. It starts responding. That is the moment impulse becomes intention. And when this happens over time, something inside you changes seats. You realize you no longer have to kill the fire to feel safe. You have to remember the center until the fire accepts its place as servant. And this is not just about anger. It touches the sexual desire you demonized, the ambition you repressed until it turned into apathy, the hunger to be seen you called vanity, though it was a cry for legitimate recognition. The fire was never the adversary. Forgetfulness was. Forgetfulness of structure, forgetfulness of order, forgetfulness of the name. And when the name is remembered, the Segulah says, order returns, and the fire becomes light. So now, a brutal question. What does this change in the way you talk to yourself when you fail? If you still treat yourself as spiritual trash, did you understand this Segulah? If you still believe the only solution is to kill everything you feel, did you understand this Segulah? If, on the other hand, you use this as an excuse to do whatever you want and call it sacred energy, did you understand this Segulah? Maybe the answer is no to all three, because the path it sketches is narrower and deeper. It is the path where you stop idolizing the fire, you stop demonizing the fire, and you start looking at the one who was always meant to wear the crown over the fire. In the next episode of this series, we're going to take a step very few people are willing to take. We will place this model from the Zohar right next to the biblical language of heart, flesh, and spirit. We will ask, how does this idea of redeemed fire interact with the battle between flesh and spirit in Scripture? And deeper, how much of what you call sin is simply fire without an axis? And how much is resistance to the light itself? Between what the Zohar suggests and what the Bible declares, there is a convergence point almost nobody explores. That's the point we're going to cross between the veils. If you feel that the fire inside you has never been just psychological, don't treat this as content. Treat it as a summons. Rewatch this. Pause where it hurts. And hold at least one line. The fire was never the adversary. Forgetfulness was. Between the veils, what is remembered returns to serve.